Alright guys, of course you know me already. I am Quita, aka Malaysian Quita, and I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Sin TV Now, where of course I bring you smart, intelligent news, all from an ethnic studies approach. So, I know, what the heck, it sounds so new. like what's going on? Well guys, you know what, I'm always changing things and refining things and kind of like getting this show to be where it needs to be. And one thing I've kind of realized about YouTube is that I can't, you can't do variety on YouTube anymore. You gotta have a niche. And it's not a bad thing, but for me, my niche is, of course, gaming I love, and talking about diversity and news and that type of stuff. But I really decided that this show needed to really change, and I felt like it just wasn't getting anywhere with some of the content that I was talking about. So I got inspired yesterday, and I decided that I wanted to take a more interdisciplinary approach in regards to talking more on the diversity side of things. So that's what today's episode is on. We're going to be focusing about what is the best way to talk about race. In the media, we see sometimes that race is something that, it's talked about in a negative sense, and there's a lot of stereotyping and misconceptions out there. But how do you really have these conversations and trying to do it in an intellectual way without coming off ignorant, without coming off like just you're kind of coming from a place that you clearly don't know what you're talking about. But that's often the case when I started kind of learning about ethnic studies and studying race. Was at first I was just kind of taking it from my cultural lens, which is fine, but as I continued to study, I realized that I had to open up my perspectives, and the best way to do that was from learning from another culture that was different from my own. So for today, guys, we're going to focus on that. We're going to talk about what are the best books to really have a race discussion, like really talking about race. And then we're going to talk about what the ethnic studies approach is. And then I got some affordable makeup, guys. I can't believe it, but I got some makeup from Walmart for $1 that you will not believe. But like we always do on this program, let's get down to business. Alright guys, so this is something new for me. I am very excited because I'm doing the show a little bit differently now than I usually would do it. I finally kind of figured out what would be the best way. Now, if you check out the links below this video, I have the link to the article that I'm talking about, so you can follow along with me if you really want to. But before we get to these book selections that cross all different races, which is a good thing, right? What the heck is ethnic studies, and why did I want to take a interdisciplinary and ethnic studies approach? Okay, so this is coming from Wikipedia. Let me bring it up here. Haha! Yes! Okay. Professional, honey. No, I'm being messy. I'm being ridiculous. Okay, guys, so this is coming from Wikipedia. This is what ethnic studies is, okay? Now, the reason why I kind of have it a little bit smaller is so you guys can at least, like, see it. But I do have the link below so you can follow along, or you can look it up too and follow along if you would like. Okay, so ethnic studies in the United States is a interdisciplinary study of difference, chiefly race, ethnicity, and nation, but also sexuality, gender, and other such markings and power as expressed by the state, by civil society, and by individuals. An academic field that spans the humanities, the social sciences. It emerged as an academic field in the second half of the 20th century, partly in response to changes that traditional disciplines such as anthropology, history, literature, sociology, political science, cultural studies, and area studies were conceived from inherently a Eurocentric perspective. Its origin then lies in the civil rights era, where ethnic studies was originally conceived to reframe the way that Pacific disciplines had told the stories, histories, struggles, and triumphs of people of color on what was seen to be on their own terms. In more recent years, it has brought into focus to include questions of representation, racialization, racial formation theory. We'll get into all of these terms in the future, because I am going to do a ethnic studies 101 or racial terms 101 and really break down what do these terms mean. Like common terms that you may hear people kind of talk about in regular discussions sometimes. And more determinately, interdisciplinary topics and approaches. So the approach, guys, for Sin TV Now is going to be definitely an ethnic studies approach. We're going to look at all these things. We're going to look at race, we're going to look at ethnicity, how sexuality, gender representation, how all these things come into play, and how it really affects things like, and the approach that I'm taking it from, since it's interdisciplinary, we're going to look at history, but we're going to look at it from an entertainment culture perspective. I love studying pop culture. It's just a part of who I am, and we're going to look at it all. And there are going to be topics, and I'm just putting a disclaimer, there are going to be topics that we will be talking about on this program that are going to be very, very sensitive. So if you are a very sensitive person, or you do not like discussing these type of topics, then viewer discretion is advised. Because there are going to be some topics that we are going to get into, and it might get a little bit sensitive. But the reason why I'm talking about it from this approach is just because I feel that, yes, the entertainment industry has changed a little bit, but we still have a lot of work to do, especially in regards to the representation of Asian people, the representation of Asian men outside of K-pop, okay, outside of anime and all this stuff, which is fun. But I think that you can have the anime and K-pop, but then Asian men, as an example, should not always feel like they have to play in a martial arts movie or be the romantic interest, you know? So we'll talk about things like that. We'll also have movie reviews too. So, for example, interracial masterpiece theater, where we're going to be talking about interracial film, movies that have interracial unions in them, and also movies that have a very interesting perspective on culture. So, and we're going to get into Spike Lee movies, a lot, really interesting stuff. So that's pretty much the approach that I decided to look at, is from the entertainment perspective, because I love that, to me, entertainment sometimes can reflect reality and vice versa. But I just think, to me personally, there needs to be better intellectual representation in entertainment besides the comical kind of side of things. But that's just me personally. So that's what ethnic studies is, guys. I actually decided to study this as a doctoral degree, either this or media studies, or find a way if I can combine them. That would be really cool. But that's just been a passion of mine, and I would like to pursue that and to become an expert in this particular area, especially in regards to the lack of representation of what's called AMBW, which is Asian Man, Black Woman. So we'll talk Asian culture on this show. We're going to talk about Latino culture. and all, like, just anything revolving around, you know, race and gender representation, all that kind of stuff. So I think the show, we're gonna have a lot of fun with it. I hope it's gonna be educational, but we will talk about those, you know, sensitive topics, like for example, white privilege and what does that mean and things like that, and also kind of talking about, you know, that white people do have a culture as well, and things like that. Like, should white studies be included in an ethnic studies program? I say yes, because white people have a culture. And I actually, this is just my personal opinion, I think it can be very difficult for white people to talk about diversity and inclusion, just because of how history treats diversity and inclusion in regards to, like, for example, white people and African American people. Now, for me, and I'm just being honest with this, I'm not going to go too much, of course, into African American history. And the reason why, and this was something that I explained on my other show, which is called the Curvy Metalhead Show, recently, and I'll talk about this briefly, and we're going to keep moving here. But recently, I shared my results from an ancestry, pardon me, DNA test. I was really wanting to find out, you know, what was my ethnicity and things like that. Because sometimes we know who we are, but it's always interesting to see if there's more to you than what you may think that you are. And I took it upon myself to share this experience because I felt like, you know, I really wanted to share my culture. I'm really, you know, relearning some, you know, some new things about my culture. It was something that I was very proud of. And, you know, I've had my ups and downs in regards to cultural acceptance. For most of my life, I've been kind of seen as not being black enough. And to me, I feel it's partially due to the way that I sound. Some people say I sound white. But there's no such thing as sounding white. I'm just talking the way that I talk. And of course, you know, I like to talk in a proper manner. That's just me. So it's a challenge that a lot of, and I'm only speaking for myself, but it can be challenging for African and African American people who kind of deal with this issue of not being black enough. And it becomes a frustration because for me, it's like I love my people, I really do. And I would love to talk about these issues on my show. But what seems to happen, and this is what happened, I actually got a lot of negative comments. And a lot of people being really, you know, really rude to me about it, about my results, and people being like, you know, you shouldn't be surprised, you know, that you're African and things like that. But the thing is, if for anybody who has studied the history of Africa, you know that Africa is very, very interracially blended, and there's a lot of diversity that has gone on for many generations. So for some African and African American people, you know, you're told your history, but then you may take one of these DNA tests and find out something different. And that's what happened to me, guys. I thought I was two particular nationalities, and then my results were something completely different. And I've been, you know, I asked my parents, like, why, you know, the results were like this. And I come to find out that when it comes to, like, my history of, like, my family and stuff like that, there's still things that are just left in an unknown way, where it's like I would need to do more research and find out what happened to my ancestors and things like that. And I was trying to share this on my show because not only did it mean something to me, but I wanted to share it with all of you, to see how, you know, how culture can be something that can change. You know, it's always changing, it's always growing. and you're evolving and things like that. And I thought it was going to be a beautiful thing, but I was just subjected, guys, to some really negative comments, some really mean comments, and it really hurt my feelings because I really wanted to share my culture, to really talk about Africa, you know, because we have to be honest. Sometimes Africa is seen in a very stereotypical way because of the representations in the media. And that's not how all African or African American people perceive themselves, you know? So I was kind of sharing my story because I thought it would be really cool to share that with you. And maybe for you, because I think everybody should be proud of where they come from. And I think it's cool for everybody to learn about that. And that's what I was trying to do with my video, with sharing my results. And then it just turned into the same thing that I'm dealing with all the time. Is just nothing but negativity when I talk about African and African American culture. And that should not happen. You know, it shouldn't happen. So I had to take the video down because of the negativity. And unfortunately, guys, I'm, you know, I was thinking about taking another test, like another ancestry test, to kind of compare the results that I got from the first one to see how accurate they were. But I decided that that's something that I'm just not going to do on this show or any of my programs in regards to talking about my culture. It's sad because I would love to have some really cool discussions on, you know, really interesting topics about African and African American culture in regards to entertainment. You know, talking about African movies and their impact. Talking about the movies from the 70s and the 80s and how that kind of changed the perceptions of what people thought about African and African American culture. I wanted to even do a special on Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, because although the movie was funny, it also kind of caused some stereotypes about African people, and African people had a really hard time kind of dealing with those type of perceptions that were in the movie, you know, because not everybody in Africa dresses like Coming to America. And I wanted to have some really good intellectual positive discussions, but because of the negativity that I received from that video, that gave me a clear indication that unfortunately I can't really talk about African and African American culture because I am not black enough. People say that I culturally appropriate and all this type of stuff. So I just can't talk about it because I'm not black enough, apparently, and I would like to apologize for not being black enough. So, you know, and I'm not being sarcastic with this. I'm really being real with it. But it was just really sad that this was something that meant a lot to me, and it got turned into a negative thing, and it got turned into, it just was hurtful to see some of the comments that I read on that particular video. And it was something that really meant something to me, guys. It really meant something. So from this point forward, I've just decided that I'm not going to do story times anymore. I'm not going to share anything about my culture. And if I do talk about something in regards to African and African American culture, it will be minimal. It's just because anytime, it's just, I don't know why. It's like I talk about, Latino culture, I don't have this issue. I talk about, Asian culture, I don't have this issue. But for some reason, when I'm trying to have a discussion, like for example on my other show, the Curvy Metalhead Show, I would love to talk about African American bands and their impact in the metal community. And I would also like to talk about why African American or African metal bands don't get the same attention as their white counterparts and things like that. And not it turning into a discussion about segregation, but having a conversation about what can we do to have better cultural integration and better discussions about diversity in metal without it turning into a negative thing or a negative discussion. And it's just sad for me that I have to say this. Actually, guys, this hurts me to say that I can't talk about African and African American topics much at all, because it just turns into a negative discussion, and then people say that I'm not black enough. Well, you know what? Like I said, I'm not black enough then, so I'm not having those discussions anymore. I really wish I could, because I think it would give better positivity to debunk the stereotypes that a lot of African and African American people kind of have to deal with. That's, I was trying to be positive. I wanted to share my story, and I was going to do it somewhat like a reality kind of show, and really learn my family history and share that with you guys, and maybe that might inspire you to learn about where you come from. There is a pride, guys, of learning where you come from. It makes me feel complete to know that I learned something new that I should be proud of. But it's hard for me to be proud of my heritage when I'm constantly dealing with negativity because of sharing it, because of me being who I am. It's very frustrating. It's like, I always tell myself this, like, I love everybody for who they are. I like to look at people by the content of their character, like how you present your personality to me. I can recognize that you are a different race than me, but that's it. That's it. But at the end of the day, if you like things that I like and we get along, I don't care where you come from. I don't care about your sexual orientation, what race you are. But it's just sad to me that when you try to give something that is positive about African or African American people, or talking about the culture in a way that is not culturally appropriating, it always turns into a negative discussion. I don't know why it only happens with discussions about African and African American people. I don't know why. I'm still trying to figure it out. I would like to do research on it, but I know that if I started doing research on this, I would just be faced with negativity, and I would just feel like it just wouldn't go anywhere, which is sad for me to say. Maybe someday the perception will change, and then we can have those type of discussions. But right now, it's like I just can't have those discussions, and that's sad. I mean, from time to time, if it relates to the topic, to be fair, like civil rights, yes, I have to talk about the inclusion of the African American community, because it was a very vital role. It was a very important, time in history. But I feel that when I talk about these things, it's just going to be seen as negative. That's sad for me to even say that. It should be something positive. I think it's a good thing when someone who looks like me is trying to talk about African and African American people and our culture in an intellectual manner. It gives respect to it. And it's sad to me that I cannot have those type of conversations without dealing with so much negativity, or people telling me that I'm not black enough. When am I going to be black enough then? It hurts, guys. I gotta be honest. When I read some of those comments that were posted, it really hurt me, because this was something that I didn't have to share. The stories that I share and the things that I talk about, I don't have to share it. But I share it because I want for people to know that not all African or African American people act stereotypically ratchet. Just because you see black people on Love and Hip Hop, that is not a complete representation of all of us. We all have our unique voices. We all have our unique stories that need to be told and need to be heard. But they cannot be heard when you are putting down an intellectual person of color like myself who really wants to put in the time to talk about cultural differences and to make some type of change. Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But at least I want to take it upon myself that when someone sees someone like me, they can treat someone who looks like me a little bit differently than what they see on TV. That's what I'm trying to do. But it was sad that I had to take that video down because people thought I was being fake. Why would I be fake about sharing my culture? Something that I'm supposed to be proud of. Something that I'm supposed to take pride in and not be ashamed of. But when I try to share my culture in the way that I feel is the right way to present it, I just deal with tons of negativity. So I'm just going to really not have a lot of discussions, unfortunately, about African and African American culture because of me not being black enough. Unfortunately, I cannot have those dialogues because I am not black enough to have those type of discussions. And that to me is sad that I have to say that, guys, because this is something that I've dealt with my whole entire life. Because I played video games, I wasn't black enough. Because I watched anime, I wasn't black enough. Because I listened to metal music, something that I just love. I love heavy metal. It's not because I'm trying to be something that I'm not. I know what I am. I know that I am a minority. I know how I'm going to be treated in certain situations. I know this. But I try to look overhead of that and just be like, you know what? I'm not going to let, negativity like that define who I am. I want to, get better, get smarter, get stronger, get wiser, and to me, that's what life is all about. That's why I share my story. Because for me, guys, if I had the amount of confidence that I had when I was in high school, I think that I probably would be in a much better place about how I see myself. I don't find myself attractive. You know why? Because so many people told me that because I have African features that I couldn't be attractive. And I believed that. That was the sad part. I wanted to get like plastic surgery, change my whole appearance because I thought that would make me happy. But I had to look inside of myself and say, no, you have to love yourself for who you are. And now, for the first time in my life, guys, I feel like I've come full circle. I feel happy. I'm accepting my body. I'm accepting my skin tone. I don't feel ashamed of who I am. But this made me feel so discouraged about me talking about my people, because in the back of my mind now I'm going to be like, okay, I can't talk about African and African American culture because I'm not black enough. When am I going to be black enough? That's the thing. When? Why can't I just be me? Why can't people just accept me for being who I am? Why do I always have to feel like this? It's not fair. All I was trying to do was share my experience because I thought it would be cool to talk about African movies, talk about African fashion, talk about Asian, talk about all the wonderful, the beautiful diversity of nationalities that we have in America and around the world. I want to appreciate that. But it's sad to me that because I don't fit the criteria, it's really sad. I don't fit the criteria of being black enough. In the future, guys, I will do a separate video defining that term. It's going to be one of the rare videos that I talk about African and African American culture, because I know anytime I talk about it, I will deal with that. You're not black enough, you know, you should not be talking about it. But I am going to talk about it just because it's something that affects me every day. Like, what is not being black enough? And why do we say this? Because if you embrace who you are culturally, then you are who you are, and you should be proud of that. I don't care what race or sexual orientation you want to represent. You should be proud of who you are. But it's so hard to be proud of who you are when people are just tearing you down every day for sharing something that means something to you. And I'm not saying this to be rude or, you know, or being ratchet or something like that, but I am tired of not, you know, of just not being allowed to love who I am. I'm just constantly put down on here. And I'm just being me. It hurts, guys. Like I gotta keep it, you know, I gotta keep it real, alright? So of course Dusty, hey, welcome to the show, and Dusty says, hey Quita, thank you for saying white people have a culture. You guys do. White people do have a culture. It's just that I think because of the whole white privilege like discussion, I think to me that's what causes that kind of segregation, and you know, like what it was saying here in regards to ethnic studies, the Eurocentric perspective. I don't think there's anything wrong with that perspective. I just think that it just needs to be fairly integrated when we talk about cultural history. That's just how I feel. If we talk about, you know, European... Excuse me. Let me get some water here. If we talk about, you know, European history, you know, we also have to give the same balance of Asian history, of African American history, of, you know, Latinos, and etc., etc. So that way you have a very fair diaspora of the cultural experience, you know. The American experience is a very intercultural experience, you know, depending on where in the world that you study. You know, there's always a history of cultures, you know, coming together, separating, but integrating, things like that. That's why I love talking about AMBW, is just because of that. Alright guys, so yeah, so it's just sad. I mean, I'll talk about African and African American history when it's needed, because, you know, I want to give respect to those people who work their asses off to make sure that we all, regardless of race, have, you know, a voice, you know. So that's just how I feel about it. It's just sad. It was just really sad. I mean, when I read some of those comments, guys, I'm not gonna lie, it hurt me. I almost cried. I almost cried. You know? It's sad. And Dusty says, that totally sucks. I really wish I had seen that video. Yeah, it's just sad. I'm sorry, Dusty. It's just sad that, you know, I feel the way that I feel. It's like I really love my people. You know, and I have honest discussions about this. And you guys know, you know, you guys seen me struggle with this. But I'm just tired of hurting so much, you know, because I'm not black enough. When I'm like, you know, I love my people. I just want to be accepted. And it's like I can never be accepted, and it hurts. It really hurts. You know, and here I am. I was like, you know what? I want to do African movie reviews. But I know if I do African movie reviews, then I'm going to get those negative comments of people being like, oh, you're not black enough, so you shouldn't be talking about African movies. You know, because you watch anime, you shouldn't be talking about. It's frustrating. It can be really, really frustrating. So, um, we'll talk about it. That's gonna be a future episode, is talking about what does it mean to not be black enough. I found a really interesting research article that was done that kind of broke down these characteristics of what these particular African American people like myself, who have this label put on them, how it affects them. Guys, you have no idea when someone says you're not black enough, it really affects me. It really does. You feel like the best way I describe it is like you feel a disconnect. You feel like an outsider. You feel like you don't belong, you know, and it hurts. It really, really, really hurts. And there are some African, you know, and African American people who go through that. And it's a very, very, it's, guys, growing up and constantly being teased for that, it just, it makes you feel so lonely. It makes you feel excluded. And I just kind of, you know, growing up, I just kind of kept to myself. Because I was a very social and very outgoing kind of person. But when I would get to school, I would just get maliciously bullied for not being black enough. And I just ended up, you know, I would just sit in the cafeteria by myself sometimes. And I would want to cry, but then I figured, what's the point of me crying? Because they would just make fun of me a lot more, you know? So it was really hard. I mean, guys, I got made fun of all through my college career so far. I mean, you know, when you try to have discussions about diversity, you know, especially when you're trying to have discussions on African or African American issues, it's really sad that sometimes it just gets dismissed as not being important. And this is the reason why I tell many people of color, or people who feel that, you know, they feel like they're insignificant. No, you are somebody, and you have to use your intelligence if you want to get anywhere in life. And that's just something that I realize. You know, every time I speak, that's helping to break down, you know, a wall of ignorance, maybe for someone who may have had assumptions about how, you know, someone like me looks like. You know, I try to talk about diversity from a very positive perspective, but I like to talk about diversity from a real perspective. And that's not an easy thing to do, guys. It's just, it's really not. So, but yeah, that's just how I feel sometimes. It's tough. It's like I love everybody, regardless of who, you know, who your background, I don't care. But it just hurts when you're told that. Like, people have told me for my whole life that I was not black enough. It was really frustrating. Because here I am trying to learn my culture, trying to embrace my culture, trying to love who I was. But people would not allow me to really express that. I would just be knocked down all the time. And guys, it got to the point, and I have to be honest, where I felt defeated. I felt like, you know, what was the point of me going to college? Maybe I should just not go to college, you know? I felt so low. That was a very low point in my life, guys. I have to be honest. It was really, it's really tough. And, man, I'm trying not to cry today, but damn, just talking about it is so frustrating. You know, because if someone like me, like, makes it, right, I get successful, you know how many walls that knocks down? Like, I think sometimes people don't realize that. Like, when you see someone who looks like you that's made it, right, in Hollywood or something like that, doesn't it make you feel good that you're like, wow, this person went through a lot of hell, but they made it? you know? And instead of people encouraging that, they just want to put you down. It's sad. It's really sad. Like, I always tell people when they feel defeated to pick themselves up and keep moving. Because you'll make it. You know, hard work does pay off if you believe in yourself. And I had to believe in myself, guys, to be the woman that I am today. I'm not perfect because I'm human. And that's what I said on my other show. And I say this in all due respect because I am really trying to represent for everybody who has felt indifferent. Nobody wants to be treated different, right? Nobody wants to feel, you know, less than. I don't care what race you are. I fight for everybody when it comes to research and things like that. You know, people think it's weird for me to talk about things like, you know, Asian culture and I'm an African American person. That shouldn't matter. You like what you like, you know? But it's just sad to me. It is. So Dusty says, well, I love you the way you are. I love your voice, and you are so beautiful and kind, and you give us a safe place to get personal and cry. Thank you for all you do for us. I'm laying in bed watching, so sorry if I fall asleep. I may fall asleep, girl, okay? You know? Trust me, it was a very long day for me, too. I am exhausted. But I still, you see, here's the thing, guys. Sometimes you guys don't realize, guys, I be working so hard that sometimes I come on here and fall asleep. But I want to do the show because I believe in these shows. I would like to make a difference with these shows if I could. You know, change doesn't happen overnight, but it's so important to respect intellectual people. You know, to respect education. And education doesn't necessarily mean a degree, guys. Education means that there are people out there who take the time to learn and then explain these discrepancies about cultural perception to people who may think that it's not important to incorporate that in regards to education. That's what ethnic studies is for. Ethnic studies, to me, is not about segregation of the races. It's not about, you know, like that, like inequality. It's about having thorough discussions that brings us all together so that way, if there is, let's say, you know, you're not familiar with white culture, then there are books out there that you can learn about it. But I think, you know, it goes beyond a book, guys. You have to talk to said cultural group. If you are not sure about white culture, then find a white person who would be open to having those types of discussions. And then you learn something. That's how I learned about white, you know, understanding white culture better, was because I actually went to a program about it. It was like a workshop about understanding whiteness from white people. It was the best thing that I ever went to, because a lot of times when we're talking about diversity, it's mainly people of color. But when you think about diversity, guys, race really is only one component of it, because you got to look at people with disabilities, LGBTQIA people, you know, people who are multiracial. You're looking at age. All these things kind of play a part in it. So I always take it upon myself to step outside of my comfort zone. You know, I learned about Native American culture and how, you know, Native American people, even up till now, are being treated. And their culture almost was pretty much eradicated. And there are many nations that are still picking up the pieces because of what happened to their people in history. Listening to native language, beautiful thing. I mean, the language, guys, is so beautiful. You know, and I love learning about that type of stuff. It makes me feel so happy to know that there's just so much beautiful diversity out here, and that there are so many people who want to make a difference, want to, have these type of conversations. They're not easy to have, let me tell you. So we'll get to that right now. So here are my recommendations here. This is coming from Bustle, and it says 10 books about race to read instead of asking a person of color to explain things to you, because that can be tough. Okay, because I think a lot of times when people think about people of color, it's a very homogenized term, but you cannot just take one person's, one person of color's experience and then magnify that experience that, oh, all African American people have gone through this. No, because different African American people have different experiences of how they encounter things about culture or entertainment and things like that. Okay, and Dusty says, I try not to tell people that I'm German. Why? I love German culture, guys. Like, I love the music. Well, you know me, I like me some German men, okay? Some Polish men be looking fine. Like, men from Europe in general, I would date them all, okay? Like, you guys are sexy up there, alright? Looking fine up in Europe, okay? So, I am a mess. Okay. So yeah, this is there's so many great recommendations. So let's go through it here, okay? We're going to just read a little bit of the intro, and then we'll get into the discussion here. So it says, in today's current political and cultural climate, it's crucial that everyday Americans are engaging in important conversations about race, bias, discrimination, and privilege. Excuse me. For people of color, these conversations are nothing new. They are pardon me, I can't even, what is going on with me today? They are a requirement in communities where experiences of racism, bias, and bigotry are a part of everyday life. And I have to be honest, guys, as a person of color, you just get used to it. You shouldn't get used to it, but you get used to it because you know that you're always going to be treated differently unless you're in an environment where people get who you are. It sucks, but that's what I've had to come to terms with. I can be well educated, I can be well put together. If someone thinks that, I am stupid, they're going to think that way. But I have to believe in myself that I'm intelligent. It doesn't mean that I'm better than the person who may think I'm stupid. But that self-affirmation is what a lot of people of color have to do, guys, in order to survive, in order to feel like human. I'm just being honest here, okay? Oh, okay, I see, Dusty. That sucks. I'm so sorry you have to go through things like that. That really sucks. Ugh. Wow, that really sucks. So, okay, so it says here, but for many white people who have never been burdened by a system built specifically to keep us down, well, I personally don't believe in that, because like I said earlier, white people have a culture as well, okay? So we have to kind of look at it, on both sides, right? Okay, so these conversations can seem confusing, uncomfortable, and awkward, which makes them even more necessary. If you're not sure how to talk about issues of race in America, try picking up one of the many incredible books about race instead of asking people of color to explain it to you. Now, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, okay? Because here's the thing about books. When you read a book, you're only getting one one side of the perspective, right? You're not necessarily getting some of the other components that may not always be part of the discussion. So I could read a book about, whiteness, right? Or white culture, but that doesn't mean that I know everything about the white experience because I'm not white myself. The way that I would probably look at the book is, okay, this is the experience of this white person. That does not mean that everybody who is white thinks that way. So that's the way you kind of have to look when you're looking at a book. Just think of it that it's one perspective. It's just one perspective. And it's not it's not speaking for the whole particular ethnic group. So we have to remember that, guys, okay? So here are the recommendations here. I'm not going to go through all of them because if you want to go through all of them, the link is below. But these are some crucial ones that I think when you're having these type of conversations would be important, okay? So the first one is by, hopefully I say her name right here, it's like Ijiloma Olu, which is called So You Want to Talk About Race. That's how it looks like right here, okay? So it says, in her best-selling book, So You Want to Talk About Race, editor-at-large, the establishment of Ijiloma Olo, unpacks some of the biggest racial issues facing the U.S. or the United States today, including this woman had balls to write this, guys. These are very, very sensitive topics, including white privilege, microtransgressions, police brutality, the Black Lives Matter, movement, and so much more. Okay? Simple, straightforward, and razor sharp, this book is accessible and friendly user guide for anyone trying to understand identity, representation, and racism in modern day America. Yeah, I will say this book, I've heard a lot about it. It is a very strong read. I would recommend probably reading this book as a discussion piece. Like you read it by yourself and then you come together as a group to talk about it. Because discussing white privilege is a very, very tough issue. Because the idea of privilege is kind of coming from the perspective of a person of color. So that's what makes it really tough. That's what makes it really, really tough. It's coming from, it's coming from that perspective. So this is just me. I personally feel that when it comes to things about white privilege, I feel that white people should write about it. That's just me personally. You can write a book as a person of color and how it may make you feel and how it relates from your perspective. But to me, to truly understand whiteness, you have to talk to a white person. You can talk to a person of color about it, but they're only going to be looking from their experiences interacting with a white person. That is completely different than talking to a white person about their culture. That's just the main thing that I've kind of learned, is that when I read a book that is written by a person of color about white privilege or white culture, it has a completely different feel because it's interpersonal. They're talking from their experience. But when I read a book about, white privilege and it's coming from a white person, it makes a little bit more sense to me because I can understand where their logic was coming from as well, to be fair. But it's a very touchy subject. It's a very, it's a very, very touchy subject. So I personally feel that, the best way for me to understand how white people feel is to talk to white people who are open to having those discussions. But you have to do it in a way that it's respectful and it's not kind of coming off as you kind of talking down to them, because that's often the issue when it comes to diversity, is especially amongst, like, I would say white people and people of color, is that if you want to have that kind of dialogue about things like segregation, stuff like that, you can't talk down. You don't want to do that. You want to ask those inquisitive questions of maybe why does this person feel this way, or like things like that. So this book kind of does a really good job in talking about that as well. Now, I'm just picking one from each category here. Okay, so this one I want to get and actually review for the show. This one is called An African American and Latin History, or Latins, I think is the way, History of the United States by Paul Ortiz, okay? So, if you want to understand the racial landscape of modern-day America, you first have to understand the nation's past, which I agree, okay? And Paul Ortiz's new bottom-up history book is the perfect place to start. Spanning more than 200 years, this alternative narrative offers a definitive and intersectional look at the country's development through the eyes of the African American and Latin communities that help flourish and often to their own detriment. There's often this stereotype about African Americans and Latinos kind of being segregated, but when you really look at the history of African and Latino culture, we are very much connected and related and integrated, and there are many similarities between our culture. I mean, there are people who are Afro-Latinas. Okay, so for example, like Lamara La Negra, she has African in her, but she is also, a Latina. So our histories have always been connected. It's just that the problem is the historical interpretation sometimes of, like, for example, when I was learning American history in the later part of my high school career, it made it seem like Latino culture was this separate entity, which it is, but there are a lot of connections to African culture. And those connections were never made in, like, the history books that I would read. So this is why it is important, guys. Knowledge is power. It is good to read. It is very, very good to read and to comprehend and understand what you are reading. So, yeah, it's, And Dusty says everyone is so screwed up. I don't think that everyone is so screwed up, Dusty. I just think that there are a lot of historical discrepancies and a lot of misunderstandings about how people see culture. I think if some people, or more people were willing to take the time to understand how these perspectives are related to each other, I think it would bring our society together a lot more. But the problem is you have ignorance, and you have all these other kind of factors that kind of block the way of that unity from happening. But that's just me. Okay, so me, we gotta talk about the fine Asian people. How you doing? Asian people are my people, like I always say. This book I'm going to get for sure. It's by Ellen D. Wu, and it's called The Color of Success: Asian Americans and the Origin of the Model Minority. This is something that's often a cliche stereotype about Asian American people. They are seen as the model minority, like all of them just get this easy success and it's handed to them. But what people don't really understand that Asian people, especially coming into America, they went through the same experience as African American people. Asian people were treated as slaves in a way on the railroads that were formed in America and things like that. So there's a lot of history about Asian people that doesn't always get like talked about in the textbooks like that. So you know like for example, the Japanese were put in internment camps and things like that. So Asian people have really, and they continue to go through a lot of misrepresentation about their people. But I'm glad to see that there are people like, for example, Ruby Ibarra. I will be reviewing her album called Circa 1991. Go get that album. It does a really good job talking about the struggle. She really does. The album is like from start to finish, guys, is fantastic. She does a really, really good job with the representation of Filipino women and what they have gone through. I mean, Filipino people, guys, I mean, they have really suffered. I was really shocked to kind of read and learn about that. But Ruby Ibarra really speaks not only for her people, but she really speaks for the immigration experience. That's a very hot topic right now of how people treat immigrants. And I really could relate to her album. Like, people saying my name wrong, or people like misspelling my name, or people not taking the time to understand my name and things like that. Like I remember growing up that I wanted a more American sounding name, because I felt that if I had a American sounding type of name, it would just make it easier for me, for people to not mispronounce my name and things like that. So yeah, it's a really good album. But yeah, this book is called The Color of Success: Asian Americans and the Origins of the Model Minority. Look at all those sexy Asian daddies right there. How you doing? No, I'm being a mess here. Okay, so it says, for decades, Asian Americans have been perceived as the model minority, but for a long time, the country feared the threat of their yellow terror. How did this particular minority group stereotype transform so radically, and in what way does the new perception of Asian Americans cause harm? Ellen DeWoo tracks this metamorphosis and all of its racial implications in The Color of Success, a eye-opening book that will make you confront what you think about America's history with otherness. And for me, there are not a lot of to me there are tons of Asian history books out there that talk about how they came to America and things like that. But I've noticed that there needs to be more books being written by Asian people to kind of talk about what were the results of being labeled as a model minority. Because to say that you're a model minority, that means you are like perfect. You can't have imperfections. And for many Asian people, it becomes a real high stressor, just from the Asian people that I have talked to, this pressure to succeed, the pressure of, of failure and things like that. It just makes you really stressed and very uncomfortable. And yeah, it's a really good book, guys. Like I thought that was really, a really interesting perspective. Now, this is a book, too, that I like collecting books that are written by white people who talk about diversity. I just love those type of books. Because you would never, I think a lot of times when people think of diversity, they think the book is going to be written by like a Latino or an Asian or an African American person. But I really like to recognize that white people also deal with racism, and it sucks. Just like how it sucks for someone like me to deal with racism, I feel too that it's even tougher as well, in the same degree, being a white person and having to have those type of discussions. It's really not easy, you know, like you would think it would be. Because most of the time people kind of think about it from white privilege, where it's like, oh, you're white, so you have white privilege. Not necessarily. If you're in an environment where you're the minority, you encounter a similar like experience. It's not going to be the same, but it's a similar like experience of being treated differently. And this is something that's not always talked about. So that's why I was really fascinated with this book. It's called Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race. It's written by Debbie Irving. And it says here, honest to the point of cringeworthiness, Waking Up White dives headfirst into the uncomfortable world of racial privilege. It's very uncomfortable to talk about these things. In it, author Debbie Irving opens up about her experiences living as a white woman and coming to terms with the fact that she exists in a world that rewards her for her skin color and punish others for theirs. If you are still waiting for your aha moment, this could be the key. So yeah, this is the main reason why I want to read this book, is because it was so interesting that she thought of her whiteness as a that, you know, it was a reward, and that's very unusual to kind of think in that sense. So I will get this book to review, definitely, guys, and we'll have a good discussion about it, because I do think that's kind of interesting when a white person talks about racial privilege, because to be honest, white people don't have to talk about it because it's not part of the discussion, unless it becomes it's like a situation where you have to have that type of conversation. That's just how I feel. But yeah, it's a really interesting way of thinking about being a white person. It's very interesting to me. Okay, so now this book I thought was really interesting because there are not a lot of books too about the Muslim American experience. You know, I would say because of society and media, people who are Muslim American, it's seen as a negative thing. So this book is called This Muslim American's Life, Dispatches from World Live. I can talk today. Dispatches from War on Terror, and is written by Mustafa Bayoumi. And it says, in this eye-opening book about fear, racism, paranoia, and surveillance, Mustafa Bayoumi offers an unflinching look at the culture of the war, man, I can't talk today, the war on terror as experienced by Muslim Americans. A powerful blend of personal experience and academic research, this engaging collection of writing is important and a timely addition to the world of Muslim studies. So yeah, this book, very, very strong subject matter. So I would say viewer discretion is advised on that, because it is a very controversial subject, the war on terror and the results of that. So if you're interested in that, then maybe this might be a book that you would consider. This is one I feel is very essential to have a discussion on. It's called The Hidden Rules of Race, Barriers to an Inclusive Economy, and it is written by Andrea Flynn, Susan R. Holmberg, Dorian T. Warren, and Felissa J. Wong. This book it seems to be very popular in ethnic studies. Okay, so it says, when we talk about race and equality in this country, it's typically in societal terms or social terms. That is correct. Pardon me. But in the United States economy is one of the biggest barriers to an equal and inclusive nation where black and white families are granted the same opportunities. At least that is what the Hidden Rules of Race strives to prove by offering up concrete examples of the many ways in which unspoken rules of race and economics perpetuate inequality. I think that's very interesting to combine social, they call it social economics. That is a really interesting way to look at it, and I think that would be a really good discussion piece as well. This one is definitely essential here. Why are all the black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? And other conversations about race? Because what's interesting about this book is it really gives you like psychology of racism. And most of the time when we think about racism, it's very social, cultural. It's not looked upon about, you know, how do people become racist? Why do people, you know, why, like, what makes people racist and things like that. And talking about change, like, it is like in any ethnic studies program, this book seems to come up and seems to be like a great foundation book. The book has been revised, so I think I will buy that book too, and we'll review it on the program here. Now, here is the final one, and I should share this one because this one combines like internet studies with race, and I never really thought about this. It's called The Algorithms of Oppression: How Search Engines Reinforce Racism. Very interesting. So it's by Safia Umoja Noble, okay? It says Algorithms of Oppression. So it says in today's modern world, racism and bigotry have taken on a brand new and still largely unexplored forms that thrive in our internet culture. In Algorithms of Oppression, Professor of Communication Safia Umoja Noble investigates the many ways in which search engines like Google perpetuate and promote damaging biases that privilege white people and discriminate against people of color, especially women of color. Isn't that interesting? That a Google search could, you know, allegedly cause that. Something like that. That is very interesting. So these are the recommendations here, guys. Let me know what are some of your book recommendations. What do you think is the best way to really have a conversation about talking about race without it becoming offensive, you know? It's very interesting stuff. It's really, really good stuff. So I'll take that down. Alright, so let's move into part 2 here. And I got some makeup to show you guys. Oh my gosh. Okay. So one thing I've kind of learned though is Walmart has, see, it depends on your Walmart. For the base of my lips, guys, I like to use this. This is the Blistex. It's called Blistex Lip Medic. It's really good. It gives this nice menthol kind of feeling. Okay, so this is very, very interesting to me. So when you know, makeup is very expensive, guys, okay? It's really flippin' expensive. It's crazy expensive now. And these days, not everybody can afford that. So I went to Walmart, and Walmart, not every Walmart may have this, but they have a clearance section. And guys, I couldn't believe it. They had a container kind of like this big by this big. Like, nah, maybe that big. It was kind of small. Oh, excuse me, guys. And all the makeup in there was $1. You will not believe what I found. Let me show you guys. So the first thing that I found is the Maybelline Lumi. This is a Dream Lumi highlighting concealer in number 70, which is dark. I mean, I still can't believe this, that I got this concealer for $1. So I'll show this up a little bit. So it's a highlighting concealer. So I feel that, alright, let me get this to focus. I feel like I would have to cover this up with powder. So we'll definitely do a segment here on the show called Let's Try This, where we try new products that I have purchased. So yeah, I got that for $1, and then they had like 4 more, so I grabbed all of them because concealer is expensive, y'all. It's getting crazy. So this is number 60 in Deep. So that's how the packaging looks like here. So this one, if you put them side by side, one is probably 3 shades lighter or 4 shades lighter than the Deep. So the Deep is going to be for like darker skin tone. But I think if I mix these two together, I should get my shade. So we'll be trying these out in the future. Now the other one that I was really surprised was $1. This is the True Blend Fix Stick Concealer in Deep from CoverGirl. This stuff is really expensive. So like I'll show you. I'll do it like this. So this is the True Stick. I'm opening all these up because literally, guys, I use concealer like every day, but I don't use foundation during the summer anymore. I just put concealer under my eyes, and then I fix my face with either a light tinted face powder or like a translucent face powder, and that seems to work. I'm so sorry for yawning, guys. It's been a very long day for me. Throw this out here. But yeah, it seems to be a really nice concealer. It twists this up. So I'm going to try it tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. Next, got this for $1, guys. This is the CoverGirl Ready Set Gorgeous in Tawny. I can't put this on my entire face, so I just put it underneath my eyes. I use BB cream as my concealer when I actually run out of concealer, and it works pretty well. Guys, I could not believe this, that I got this too. This is the Maybelline Fit Me Set and Smooth Powder for $1. And this is in the shade 335, which is the darkest shade that they have in their powder so far. This is coconut. So what I like to do is take that and just set my under eye, or I use it as a brow bone highlight, or just using it as a base when I'm putting on my cream eyeshadow. And I'm surprised my eyeshadow has lasted like all day. But look at this. I just can't believe it. For $1, guys. Maybelline foundation for $1. What? And then I have here, this is the first product I want to try. This is from Maybelline. It's their Vivid Matte Liquid Lipstick in 48, which is Wicked Berry. I have been eyeing this one, and I wanted it so bad, so we're going to try it out right now. So it has that doe foot like applicator, so let's try it here. This is 48 Wicked Berry. It has no smell, which is really good. Of course, I look like I work at Hot Topic or something. What am I doing? I should have a mirror here. What the heck? I forgot this is a compact. With the first layer, I have to apply it twice, like 2 layers. I feel like it's like whipped cream on my lips. Yeah, it's a really nice color. I like it. It goes on pretty smooth at first. The first layer was kind of streaky. Second layer, it looks a little bit better. But I always like using darker colors. And I cannot believe I got this for $1. Gotta look at my lips again. Yeah, it has a nice finish to it. Like once it dries, it sets matte. That's Wicked Berry, which is number 48. Looks really good. I'm glad I picked that one. Now I get to wipe off my lips. And sorry for looking tired, guys. It has been a long day. I've worked my ass off. When you put the bliss sticks on, it doesn't stain my lips when I do that, just from my personal experience. And as a disclaimer, guys, what works for me may not work for you. Always check with a medical professional before you put anything on your face and body. Okay? So yeah, it looks good. Okay. So now the final product that I would like to show you guys is this one. This one is new. I was so excited. These are the melting pot, or melting, not melting pot, what the heck? The melting pout metallics from CoverGirl. And this is supposed to be a gel liquid lipstick. Gel. So that's how it looks like. And this is the shade 275, which is amped. So I'm going to try this one on. I was really excited about this one in particular, because I love like deep purple. Deep purple look like purple lipstick always looks good on me though. And black too. Oh, this is great. It has this kind of doe foot angled, like sponge kind of pad. It reminds me of the hard candy concealers that have that puff and you squeeze it and the product comes through. This does the same exact thing. So I can see it pushing through. So it comes out like that. Let me try to focus this. So it comes out like that. So yeah, it's not too bad. So let's try that. Wow, this is a completely different color. Than what I thought. I thought this was gonna come out like a very nice dark purple, but it's actually like a dark magenta color. I don't know what you think, guys. I think the color looks nice, but it's a little more magenta than what I thought. But that gel, do you see the shine on my lips? Oh my gosh, this gel consistency is wonderful. So I'm going to keep this one on for the rest of the video here. For the rest of the episode. Alright guys, so that's all I really had to like show you today. But you know, every episode, like I like to do on all of my shows, I would like to leave you with something to think about, okay? You know, for me guys, growing up, like I said, I was teased and bullied a lot, like many of you pardon me. But what I realized is I allowed that teasing and bullying to consume me and to put me in a negative mindset. So when we think about race, when we think about cultural identity, it's always good to take that negative ideology and turn it into something positive. But you have to remember that change doesn't always necessarily happen overnight. Sometimes change comes with wisdom and experience. And because I have more wisdom now and more experience, I'm learning that my race is a part of me, but it doesn't define everything about me. It's only one component of my intersectionality. There's so many things that make up who I am, and those are the things that you have to embrace in life. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're white, it doesn't matter if you're African American, you know, it doesn't matter what you choose to be, it's all in here. You have to believe that you deserve the best. You have to believe that you should be treated with the utmost respect. And that is why it is important to become educated and having these type of dialogues, because that is what brings change. Change is not always from negativity sometimes. Sometimes change can come from a unique voice. And when that voice speaks, that's when sometimes change happens, you know? Making a difference. That's what helps to make this world a better place, guys. It's making a difference. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I look tired as hell, but dang, my lips look popping. Glad I went with that. I think I fell asleep there for a second. No, it looks good. It looks good. But you guys let me know what you think about the products that I showed you. As well as, guys, let me think. Let me think. What do you think? I can't talk today. See, this is what happens when you got heat and then you wake up really early. But let me know what you think, you know, in regards to the makeup that I was showing you here. Like this awesome dollar makeup that I got from Walmart. But also, guys, with the main topic of, you know, today, also let me know what you think in regards to talking about race. Do you think that a book is a good starting point for talking about race? Or do you think it's better just to get a group of people together or one-on-one, or just talk about it heads on, or maybe talk about it from a more interdisciplinary like ethnic studies approach? Leave all your comments below. I'm looking forward to reading them. I'm sure we'll have some really good discussion. But guys, I'm gonna get out of here, okay? Because I need to get myself some sleep. Alright, so guys, like I always say, remember to get smart and stay informed.